Hi everybody, just a quick hello on video to show you my Adonis-like features and wave, and then I'll switch to low bandwidth mode just in case you're on the bus to Timbuktu or something like that. Okay, well, as I say, I don't want to replace the learning materials in any way. The program designers have gone to great lengths to make sure that you have everything you need in the learning materials, but a couple of you have said you did find these sessions on the different things useful, so I'm going to carry on for now. Okay, well today it's our fifth one, and we're going to have a quick tour of the balanced scorecard. Now, it does seem to me that you've all got a pretty good grip based on your own research or prior knowledge anyhow, from what I've seen on the board and in your team presentations, but I'll go through it on a basic level as if you weren't already experts, and we'll see how we go with that. Okay, so what is it? The balanced scorecard is a framework for measuring performance, which is what we're doing here, and we use financial, customer, internal, innovation, and learning perspectives. So the question arises, why should we use it? Well, it helps to clarify an organization's long-term vision, goals, and objectives, and it can come up with some key performance indicators, the famous KPIs, to monitor performance and progress. And what does it do? Well, it's a top-down method, and it can allow you to define goals and objectives and monitor progress, as we said, and it uses 4 different perspectives, for each of which we have relevant KPIs, based on, as always, the mission and vision of the organization. So when would you use it? Well, it can be used as an alternative to the traditional financial accounting methods, because it not only measures performance from a financial and commercial perspective, but it also monitors progress from internal business processes and organizational learning. So what questions will the balanced scorecard help you answer? It'll help you answer questions like, how can I articulate and communicate my strategy and align individual organization and cross-departmental initiatives to achieve a common goal by focusing on a balanced set of key performance indicators, recognizable throughout the organization, and which will lead ultimately to substantial and lasting performance improvement. So there's a great sentence to take to your next meeting, and they will worship you. Okay, well, looking at the big picture, and I know Sharon and Juliet mentioned Kaplan and Norton, and it's great that you've gone into that, but yes, it was developed by them in 1992, actually, as an alternative to the traditional measures, which were just about 100% financial, based on past performance. And as one wit said, basing your future on past performance is like trying to drive a car while looking into the rearview mirror, which sort of sums up financial accounting in one sense, doesn't it? Okay, so it's a top-down method, and you'll see on the next slide an example. We've mentioned the 4 perspectives. We've mentioned that you identify KPIs, and these help clarify long-term vision. So there's an example of it. I'll give you a couple of secs to have a look at that. We have things like financial, customers, which I love to see customers. I would like to see customers taking up the whole square, actually, because I think it all comes from there. One of the great management theorists, Peter Drucker, said, the sole purpose of business is to create and keep customers, and I agree. Because if you don't have customers, you don't have any money. You don't have any money to pay people or do anything, so customers. But that's just me. Here we've got learning and growth as well, internal business processes, and it's all based around your vision and strategy. Okay, so one of the key points is performance analysis is more than just financial. And with the balanced scorecard, you look at the demands of the environment. In other words, is the business strategy externally consistent? The business strategy, is it being achieved? So how do you decide that? The capabilities of the organization, are they internally consistent with the strategy? and the expectations of key stakeholders. Are they being met? And Henry Ford here famously said, a business that makes nothing but money is a poor business. Interesting, isn't it? When most of the CEOs spend 99% of their time working for the shareholders, or as we say in traditional terms, the owners. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little about sustainability because it comes into just about everything, and later on we're going to do some environmental stuff, so it'll feed into that nicely, I think. And it also works with the balanced scorecard. So this is the big thing, the coming thing. It's already here. How's it going to affect forming a business strategy? Well, same thing. The importance of economic growth may become less important strategically. And overall average growth of economies may fall. And revenue and profitability may be seen as less important than the overall balanced scorecard result when assessing an organization. And environmental and social performance should increase in importance. And it's important to say, if you want to look at a definition of sustainability, we bandy the word around, but what's the definition? Defined by Hubbard as development that meets the needs of stakeholders without compromising their ability to meet their needs in future. Sustainability covers the current period and effect on future generations. So classic examples you're all aware of. Say you're in the wood business and you cut down the entire forest and flog it in 1 year. That's fantastic. You've made a shitload of money, pardon my French, for the shareholders. Unfortunately, the forest is gone. There's no more. You're out of business. Alternatively, pumping all your effluent into the Swan River or something whilst making lots of money as, I don't know, a casino. That's nice for the shareholders. The profit's great. You're not paying for proper disposal, so your costs are down. But at the end of the day, if you get caught doing that, it's going to be very, very bad for the company in terms of its public image, and it may well cause big financial losses once people start getting into the legal side. So, you know, you can make a lot of money for your shareholders whilst ignoring environmental and social performance, but effectively more and more people are realizing that's a bad idea, and it will cost you more than dollars, but including dollars in the future. So what else will sustainability do in terms of affecting us as corporations? Well, the types of products and services produced are likely to change, and so are the suppliers used to produce them. And this will be most likely reflecting customer value perspectives. So as we've seen it already happening, green energy like hydro, wind, solar, geothermal will become more valued. Solar is the big one at the moment, isn't it? As customers want to reduce their impact on the environment. Moves to offer reusable bags by supermarkets have had a significant effect. And in life cycle costing, in other words, where you have to pay for emission costs and recovery and disposal of the product at the end of its life. For example, in Australia, miners have to quote-unquote rehabilitate the land where they've mined. Of course, that's a bit of a sop to the public because it takes thousands of years for the natural environment to return to anywhere near what it was after it's been abused in that way. So, but it looks good. We rehabilitated the place and it's fine. Okay, so that's more about managing public perception than actually putting it back the way it was. So the cost structures of competing products will be changed. There'll be innovation and market changes. What else can we say? Well, the types of customers and markets will also be affected because solar heating, home electricity generation, water recycling can increase. Whole new industries like the recycling of stuff from the recycling bins and things like coal-fired electricity, which we're still arguing over in Oz, will have their market opportunities significantly reduced. And these figures here say in China, coal consumption was down by 5% in 2015, driving a 35% drop in China coal imports and snuffing out the seaborne market. And that's from the Institute of Energy and Economics. What else will change? Well, the basis of competitive advantage. And remember, this whole deal that we're doing in strategic cost management is all about competitive advantage. So it's already changing as everyone's falling over themselves to be seen to be socially responsible and environmentally friendly. When you look at the ads for the miners, it's never a dirty, great hole in the ground. It's always trees and people and, wow, look what we're doing for the community and aren't we warm and fuzzy and lovely? And that's all part of this image projection. People will compete on green, in other words, low use of non-renewables, on social, like green tuna. We're not actually taking away all the fish. Well, I have heard a dire projection from one expert that there will be no fish in the sea by 2030. So that's a little bit frightening. Okay, social responsibility, fair trade coffee, I'm sure you've all seen it. And these things are going to change the nature of competitive advantage, and we need to be up with that. And I think the fifth one is your desired position in the industry. And once again, even though the shareholders, according to all the accounting law and history, are the owners, their importance is likely to downgrade, and being an environmental or social leader is going to become more important. And if you look at retailers like Costco in the US and Tesco in the UK, they're striving for the position of leading socially responsible firms. And you can see there, Tesco, nothing to do with flogging stuff in supermarkets, they're saving rainforests. That's the kind of image we're talking about. Now, the next slide is an example of Patagonia, not the country in South America, but the clothing company applies sustainability practices. And I'll leave you a minute to read it rather than bore you with my droning voice. But essentially, it's a real story of how Patagonia has won all kinds of awards for pollution prevention, product stewardship, organic cotton, honesty and openness with suppliers and the media, fair labor, and integrating sustainability into its core values. So this is the kind of thing that we need to be doing to maintain competitive advantage. I'll give you a few more seconds. You can always look at it later. Okay. And of course, I'm sure by now, in your postgraduate capstone unit, you know all about the stakeholder approach instead of just the shareholder approach. And this is the alternative to the shareholder approach. And it's a fundamentally different view, which says, yes, the shareholders own the company, buy the shares, and we do owe them a duty, and we'll try to give up dividends and so on, but the firm does operate for the benefit of several sets of stakeholders, and the shareholders are just one of these. And that's why I say things like a very financially successful company that pollutes, the stakeholders being the people who live along the river, the people in that community and state and country are stakeholders. They have a very serious interest in what you're doing, and they will take necessary action. Okay, so while shareholders are important for the capital, many are only passive investors, like day traders, for example, and they don't really give much of a rat's about the long-term welfare of the company. On the other hand, as you know, as we all know, management, employees, suppliers, customers, even long-term debt holders have a much longer-term interest in the company's welfare. So we need a multifaceted approach, and shareholder value is just one part of this. So this is a rather huge change to the accounting mentality. All right, so this leads us back in the circle. You thought I was off away with the fairies, but I'm coming back to the BSC, because when we want to measure stakeholder performance, we can look at the balanced scorecard approach rather than a shareholder approach through financial figures. So we need to know things like what measures are appropriate for each key stakeholder, and how does the organization balance performance, and what does the organization do when there's a conflict between these measures. And this is where Kaplan and Norton developed this balanced scorecard with 4 distinct perspectives, which were financial, customer, internal. Later they did change that to process, by the way, and innovation and learning, which they later changed to learning and growth. And innovation was then included in internal process. And the reason it was called the balanced scorecard was because it balanced measures of short and long-term objectives, and financial and non-financial measures, leading and lagging indicators, and internal and external perspectives. So it's sort of, you can think of it as balancing out the emphasis on pure financial perspectives. All right, so it's now the accepted internal approach to strategic performance measurement, but that balance does vary by organization. And it's after my somewhat radical speeches in the last slides, I'll just point out that it doesn't reject shareholder value. Shareholder return is applicable within the financial area, but it must not be seen as the only reason. So the customer perspective recognizes that the organization must have customers if it wants to survive and grow, and their demands may conflict with those of shareholders. So how do you balance that? This balanced scorecard takes a clearly strategic approach by recognizing the roles of learning and growth in developing the organization for the future. So this is our future perspective. We're not driving using the rearview mirror. We're looking through the windscreen up at the road ahead. Okay. So measures we developed there, by the way, long-term future. And it also recognizes the role of implementation through measuring internal process. Now, this is a bit busy, this slide, but I'll pick a couple of things out. And it's important to note that the most difficult set of measures in the conventional balanced scorecard relate to the long-term development. And learning, innovation, and growth are three examples of ways of doing this, i.e. the amount of time or the amount spent of time and money on training and development, R&D, are good indicators of intent, but these are more input measures rather than output measures of what was actually learned. So we can use things like measuring motivation by employee engagement and net promoter score. Now, I've put a little definition down here. Net promoter score is a term meaning or representing the number of people or customers who positively recommend the organization, less the number who positively oppose it. And it's been found by HR firms to be a good indicator of overall performance. So interesting one there. Net promoter score. Now, in terms of innovation, you get IBM and Merck measure the number of patents for which they apply and things like that. And in terms of long-term growth, entry into new markets or new products may be indicators of future potential, as when Steve Jobs launched the iPhone, and look what happened there. Reinvented the company. Okay, now it's important also to keep in mind that you can't just apply one cookie-cutter version to everybody. Different measures are good for different organizations, and they all depend on the business strategy being pursued. So each organization can use the BSC to develop its own set of measures within the four perspectives, because every organization has its own issues to be concerned with. There's an example of one. You're all pretty good at this, I think, judging from what I've seen on the board. So I'll just let you have a look at that for a second. Safety Incident Index is quite a good one. Most bigger firms are doing that now. It's part of their risk management strategy. Number of employee suggestions is also a good one. And staff attitude. When did you last have a staff attitude survey at your workplace? All right. Okay, so now organizations are expected to report on their performance in sustainability terms. And all you have to do is pick up the latest annual report for just about any company, Coles, Woolworths, mining company, you name it, and the cover will probably be something either friendly to the community or the environment or to do with sustainability. That'll be the cover picture. And this approach seeks to measure this environment and social community performance. It's always, we're contributing this to the community, not we're blowing up huge amounts of Australia and swiping all the mineral assets. So as we built so many houses, or we started a school, and that's all part of this managing the public perception. And we do note that nearly all the major organizations of Europe, majority of the global top 500 too, produce these things now. There's no global agreement on how it should be done, but there is this thing called the Global Reporting Initiative, which it's not compulsory, but it's developed a framework which is tending to be used for sustainability reporting. And it was referenced by about 39% of global reports in 2010. I would suggest it would be at least double that by now. You'll find connected with this, you probably are familiar with it from other units you've done, the triple bottom line concept, which I'm just refreshing here, sometimes called TBL or 3BL. And this is an accounting framework with 3 parts. Not the 4 of the balanced scorecard, but 3: social, environmental, sometimes called ecological, and financial. And many organizations have adopted this to evaluate their performance and create greater business value. There's a quick look at the Global Reporting Initiative framework. I know I said 3, but those 2 go together: internal social, external social. Then you have economic, and then you have environmental. Okay, so we could include just about anything in this. So for a lot of accountants, it seems a little bit warm and fuzzy and vague, and they want hard numbers. What we could possibly do is develop a sustainable balanced scorecard, and we'll see an example of that in the next slide. And this would build on the existing balanced scorecard by adding separate sections for social and environmental. So that could be one way of merging BSC and GRI and all the rest. So when we look at this sustainable balanced scorecard, we could look at environmental and social areas which the organization could develop specific measures for. And in the social performance area, what would one measure be? We could have a measure for employees, for suppliers, community, and for philanthropy. In other words, who is the organization choosing to support and by how much? When we look at the environmental section, we could look at material use per unit. That's a measure of efficiency and is of concern to all organizations. We could also look at energy use and water use per unit. And these are looked at as important areas in the environmental science area. And we could look at emissions, and I'm sure you've heard more than enough about emissions. Okay, there's a hypothetical example of a sustainable balanced scorecard. So you've got your financial, your internal process, your customer market, your learning and development, and you can have a current year column and a prior year column to show how you're going on. But you can look that up in your own time if it interests you. And then at the very end of it, we have social performance and environmental performance. So if we actually look at that, that's your normal balanced scorecard, but the addition is this that makes it the sustainable one: water use per unit, emissions, philanthropy, and so on. Okay, another thing is strategy maps. I mention this because I think I recall there was one in the Levi example we did on the board, or one very like a strategy map. And balanced scorecards are sometimes described as just a list of apparently independent or unconnected measures. But if we look at strategy maps, excuse me, just having a sip of tea, cause and effect models of relationships are looked at between the key strategic variables. So instead of just listing, we're actually looking at cause and effect. And this is a quote I like. Kaplan and Norton actually described the need for the balanced scorecard to be a flight simulator, not just a dashboard full of indicator dials. And they developed strategy maps as a tool to solve this issue. So I'll give you a quick look at one, but it's really a topic for another day. So just have a look at it and be aware that strategy maps are there if you hadn't come across them before. There's an example of a strategy map. So you've got efficiency, community, customers, financial, going up to return on equity, etc. I'll leave it up there for a second for you to scan it. And off we go. Okay, so when we look at key performance indicators, and what we want to do is link the business unit or functional and individual performance to organizational performance. So business units, functions, individuals should all have their performance measures. And these are the famous KPIs. And I always say there's no point in shouting at your crew to go faster and why haven't they sailed the ship to New York yet if they A, never knew how fast they were supposed to go, and B, didn't know the destination was New York. And a lot of managers have their meetings and pop their cigars and do whatever it is they do, and they don't seem to feel that the people in the engine room really need to know any of this. So one of my views is, you know, expected performance clearly specified. You need to share the information with all your employees. Even the cleaner should know, like, what's going on, because they're employees of the organization. Their life and family depend on it, and it would be nice if they actually knew what they were giving their lives for. There you go, me on my soapbox again. Okay, so we can have individual scorecards and KPIs. There's an example on the next slide. But in reality, most people focus on the KPIs that directly affect them personally rather than the organizational sort of team ones, if you like. So without clear links, that's going to be a tough nut to crack. And an example of that, you have an individual whose performance and bonus are linked to reducing the head count in their area. So if you can cut as a manager, can cut your staff costs and hours, you get a salary rise. So, boom, get rid of people, easy. However, now you've got cost, quality, service delivery, and other variables possibly going down. You've got a lowering perhaps in morale of the remaining staff who've now had to double the workload, probably for no more money because the manager wants it all for herself. And these things aren't measured. So how many places measure morale? And then they end up with the employees departing, disgruntled, going to competitors, and they have to go through all the massive expense of finding and training new people. So bingo, they cut the head count, well done, KPI met, and they've stuffed up the whole area. So these are things that at your level of thinking you need to be like seriously aware of and find ways to deal with. Okay, this is just an example of how you can link these levels with scorecard measures. So you have strategy level, performance measure, and examples. If you're looking at your business strategy, you can have an organizational balance scorecard, and some examples might be sales growth. Individual role, you might have a personal customer satisfaction rating, and the unit, you might have a customer satisfaction rating. So why isn't, well, a lot of people are using the balance scorecard, but the reason not everybody is, I suppose, is some people find it complex. So what I've done here is I put out some recommendations. If you want to successfully implement a balanced scorecard, have a look at these. I'll let you read through them. I've picked out a couple because I think they're particularly important. I like this one, use a less is more philosophy. Minimize the number of measures. You know, if you bog people down in pages and pages of measures, they basically decide that they're all meaningless and give up. And that's not what you want to achieve. Also, this is one of my bugbears, communicate the strategy, the map, the measures, the targets, communicate what they mean, communicate updates, communicate results and what they mean. To everybody in the whole organization, not just the important people in the meetings, you know, everybody should know. It should be the responsibility of every individual manager to pass on this information in a constant flow. So everyone's aware of who they're working for and why they're giving up the hours of their life. And it'll lead to happier, more empowered employees who feel like they know what's going on and are happy to be productive. Which is, of course, the precise reverse of what the joke calls mushroom management, which is keep them in the dark and feed them on, you know, BS. All right. Another one I like is to link incentives to measures chosen so that not only business units but functions and individual behavior is encouraged to align. So when I do incentives, I always give an individual incentive but a team incentive as well, all aligned with the vision and values of the organization so that you can make your bonus as an individual, but if you assist the team, then you've got more incentive there. So that way you can balance them a little bit. All right, what are the do's and don'ts of the balanced scorecard? Well, do use it to articulate your strategy, to communicate your strategy, and to help align individual, organizational, and cross-departmental initiatives toward the common goal. Also, refresh it as often as you need, so you can make sure the goals are still applicable and right. Don't use it for controlling behavior and evaluating past performance. Don't use it for bollocking people. They didn't meet this KPI, and even though it was impossible, that's not what it's for. So that's an important caveat to note there. It's not a power game. Well, there we go. Come to the end of Balanced Scorecard. I do hope it was somewhat useful for you, and do let me know if you enjoyed it on the board. And that's it. So, good morning if it's morning for you, or good afternoon, good evening, and good night. And I look forward to talking to you on the board, and keep up the great work, everyone.